Feeling, you are waiting for one. Right now, somewhere in your chest, you are waiting to feel something before you move, before you start the business, before you leave the job that has been quietly killing you for 6 years, before you pick up the phone and say the thing you have rehearsed 100 times in the shower. You are waiting for a feeling to arrive and give you permission. And I need to tell you something that is going to sound strange the first time you hear it. That feeling is never coming. Not because you are broken, not because you lack faith, but because purpose was never designed to announce itself through emotion in the first place. You have been waiting your whole life for the wrong signal. Let me say that again because it will not sound important the first time. Purpose was never designed to announce itself through emotion. It announces itself through discovery. And discovery does not feel like inspiration. Discovery feels like work. Here is what nobody told you when you were young and someone asked what you wanted to be when you grew up. Nobody told you that the question itself was already broken. Because what do you want to be? Assumes purpose is a preference, a flavor, something you select off a shelf based on what appeals to you in the moment. But a manufacturer does not ask a product what it wants to be. A manufacturer already knows what the product is for before the product exists. The purpose was fixed at the point of conception, not at the point of consumer choice. You were not a blank slate waiting to be filled with whatever felt good. You were a specific answer to a specific question, deposited into a body and sent into a generation that needed exactly what you carry. That is not poetry, that is manufacturing logic. And once you understand that, the entire framework of follow your heart starts to look like what it actually is. A beautiful sentence with almost no practical use, because your heart was never given the blueprint. Your heart can tell you what you like. It cannot tell you what you were made for. Those are two entirely different documents, and most people spend their whole lives reading the wrong one. So if purpose is not a feeling, what is it? I told you already, but I want you to sit in it this time instead of rushing past it. Purpose is a discovery, which means it already exists, separate from you, waiting to be found, the way oil exists under the ground before anyone drills for it. The oil does not become valuable the day someone feels excited about it. The oil was always valuable. It was simply undiscovered. And an entire nation can be sitting on wealth it never accesses. Not because the wealth is not real, but because nobody had the discipline to dig. That is what most people are doing with their lives. They are standing on top of their own oil field, waiting to feel like drilling. I want you to think about how strange this actually is when you say it plainly. You will spend 4 years and enormous sums of money studying subjects to earn a piece of paper for a career. You will spend more hours than you can count learning a skill for a job. But how many hours have you spent studying yourself? How many hours have you spent in deliberate investigation of your own design, your gifts, your irritations, your recurring thoughts, the problems that bother you more than they bother everyone else in the room? Most people know more about the biography of a celebrity they will never meet than they know about the internal architecture of the one life they were actually given to steward. That is not a small oversight. That is the central tragedy of a wasted life, and it is happening quietly right now to people who look completely fine on the outside. Discovery requires investigation. Feeling requires nothing. That is why feeling is easier, and that is exactly why it is the wrong method. Anything that requires nothing of you was never going to produce something valuable in you. Let me give you a second picture, because one analogy is never enough to move a mind that has been trained a different way for 30 or 40 years. Think about a seed. A seed does not feel like a tree. If you asked a seed, in whatever strange way a seed could answer, do you feel like becoming an oak? The honest answer would be no. A seed feels like dirt. It feels like pressure. It feels like darkness and cold and the total absence of anything resembling the tree it is designed to become. If the seed waited to feel like a tree before it started growing, it would rot in the ground and call it wisdom. It would call its own paralysis patience. That is what you are doing when you wait for the feeling. You are calling delay a virtue. You are dressing up fear in the language of discernment. I'm still waiting to feel called. No, you are waiting to feel comfortable, and calling is not required to be comfortable. Calling is required to be true. I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to actually answer it instead of letting it pass over you the way most information passes over you now. In one side and out the other, no residue, no cost. What is the problem that follows you? Not the problem you chose to care about because it was fashionable to care about it. The problem that finds you in quiet moments. The thing that makes you angry when you see it done badly. The thing you notice that other people walk straight past without seeing at all. That irritation is not random. Irritation like that is a coordinate. It is data. It is one of the only honest signals your design gives you. Because unlike a feeling of excitement, which can be manufactured by a good song or a clever advertisement, chronic irritation cannot be faked. You cannot manufacture 6 years of being bothered by the same unsolved problem. That kind of consistency is a fingerprint, and fingerprints do not lie the way moods do. So here is the first principle, and I want it to be one you could write on a card and keep in your wallet. Purpose is not discovered by asking, what do I feel? Purpose is discovered by asking, what have I always noticed? And what have I always been able to do that other people around me found difficult? Write that down if you need to. I will wait. Now, some of you are going to tell me that you have looked and you found nothing. You have investigated and come up empty. I want to push back on that gently but directly, because in almost every case what has actually happened is not that the investigation failed. It is that the investigation never really started. Most people's version of searching for purpose is scrolling through inspirational content for 20 minutes and hoping something lands on them like weather. That is not investigation. That is passive exposure, and passive exposure has never discovered anything of value in the history of the human race. Every scientist who found something worth finding did so through repeated, deliberate, often boring engagement with the same material over years, not through a lightning bolt that struck them while they were doing something else. You do not stumble into oil. You drill for it consistently in the same place, long after it stops being interesting. Let me take you somewhere practical, because principle without application becomes philosophy, and philosophy has never paid a single bill or fixed a single broken family. If you genuinely do not know what you were made for, here is where the investigation begins. And I want you to actually do this rather than simply agree with it in your head, nodding along the way people nod along to a sermon and then walk out and change absolutely nothing about their Tuesday. First, track your irritation for 30 days. Every time something bothers you, genuinely bothers you, not mildly annoys you, write it down. At the end of 30 days, look for the pattern. There will be a pattern. There is always a pattern, because you were not built randomly. Second, track what people ask you for, not what you volunteer. What they come to you for, unprompted, again and again, in different seasons of your life, from different people who don't know each other. That repetition across strangers is not coincidence. That is design leaking out through other people's need. Third, identify what you do that does not feel like labor to you, but looks like labor to everyone watching you do it. This is one of the most overlooked signals there is. Purpose often hides inside the thing that exhausts everyone else and simply occupies you. Where other people see effort, you experience absorption. That gap between there's exhaustion and your absorption is not a personality quirk. That gap is a map. None of that requires a feeling. All of it requires attention. And attention, unlike inspiration, is available to you every single day, regardless of your mood, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of how you slept last night. This is actually good news. If you let it be good news instead of one more assignment, it means you do not have to wait on your emotions to cooperate before you can begin. You do not have to wait for a good week. You can begin the discovery today, in a bad mood, on your worst day, because discovery was never emotionally dependent to begin with. That was always the trap. You made purpose emotionally dependent, and then you wondered why it never showed up. Because you built the entrance on a road that was never actually connected to the building. I want to say something now that I think is the center of everything we've walked through so far, and I want you to hear the weight of it rather than the sound of it. The reason this culture is drowning in people who feel deeply and produce almost nothing is that we have confused intensity of feeling with proximity to purpose. We have taught an entire generation that if something moves you emotionally, it must be your calling. And if it does not move you emotionally, it must not be for you. But feeling and calling are not the same category of thing, and treating them as the same category has cost people decades. Feeling is weather, purpose is geography, weather changes by the hour. Geography does not move because you had a bad morning. You can feel nothing at all on a Tuesday and still be standing exactly where you were made to stand, doing exactly what you were made to do. And the absence of a feeling on that Tuesday says nothing whatsoever about the legitimacy of the ground beneath you. That is the climax of everything I am telling you today. So let me say it as plainly and as slowly as I can. You are not lost because you don't feel it. You are lost because you stopped looking for it the moment the feeling didn't show up on schedule, and you mistook the silence of your emotions for the absence of your assignment. Those are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. And the sooner you separate them, the sooner you stop mourning a calling that was never missing. It was only ever unexamined. Sit with that for a moment, because I know what it costs some of you to hear it. It means the years you spent waiting were not years God was hiding from you. They were years you spent looking in the wrong location for the wrong kind of evidence. The way a man searches every room in the house for his keys except the one room where he actually left them, because that room felt too obvious to check. Now, once you have found it, once the pattern has emerged, once the irritation has told you what it's been trying to tell you for years, once the thing people keep asking you for finally makes sense as more than coincidence, something else becomes true that you need to be ready for. Discovery does not end the difficulty. It only ends the confusion. You will still have to build. You will still have to fail at the early attempts. You will still have some mornings where the assignment feels heavy rather than exciting. Because purpose, remember, was never emotionally dependent. It does not become emotionally dependent retroactively just because you finally located it. Discovery gives you direction. It does not give you comfort. Anyone who tells you those are the same thing is selling you a version of purpose that will not survive its first real obstacle. This is why so many people discover their purpose and then abandon it within a year. They mistake the temporary excitement of discovery for the permanent feeling they were originally waiting for. And when that excitement fades, as all excitement eventually does, they conclude they must have discovered the wrong thing. They had not discovered the wrong thing. They had simply arrived again at the same false expectation that got them lost the first time. The feeling was never going to sustain them. Only the principle was ever going to sustain them. The settled, unemotional knowledge that this is what they were made for, whether or not this particular Tuesday feels like it. So let me leave you with this, because a teaching like this one is worthless if it only rearranges your thinking and changes nothing about your Monday. Stop auditing your feelings for permission. Start auditing your patterns for evidence. Go back through the last 2 years of your life and find what has repeated. Find what has followed you. Find what people keep bringing to your door without being asked. That is not sentiment. That is data. And data does not require your mood to cooperate before it tells you the truth. You are not put here to feel your way into significance. You are put here to discover what was already placed in you before you had the vocabulary to name it, and then to build it with the same discipline you would use for anything else you actually believed was real. Go and look. Not tomorrow when you feel ready. Today, while you still don't.